Okay, well, thank you everyone for coming out tonight. Appreciate your attendance and look forward to any questions you might have tonight. Administratively, just a point to start. We only have this room to 6:50, so we'll take whatever questions we can up to that point, and then we're going to suspend and move across the hall and restart in about 5 minutes. So, just a heads up, we'll do a little calisthenics in the process here. Let's see, is Heather with us? No. Okay. All right. Well, I want to thank some of our colleagues within the school committee and the select board to join us tonight. So we also have a member from the SWAT team. Our hope is to make sure you get answers to whatever questions you might have. So with that in mind, maybe just a show of hands for those who haven't met them. So we have Vanessa. Raj is hiding in the back. Who else do we have back there? Mark. Okay, so we have a representation. And Heather, our brand new town administrator, is just joining us. And we have Norma hiding in the back somewhere from the SWAT team. And Wade, sorry. So from last year's budget presentations, we got plenty of feedback, most of which said fewer charts and graphs, please. So we've tried to honor that and tried to focus on concepts rather than graphs. And as far as the format, we're going to hold all questions until the end. So then feel free to come to the mic and ask whatever questions. If you don't mind, introduce yourself and your address. It's not mandatory, but preferable. And I will ask, when we get into the Q&A portion of the evening, please direct your questions to the board, not to each other. We don't want this to get contentious between neighbors. So please keep that in mind. And to introduce our Finance Committee members, we have Chris Berglund, Pete Murphy, Clena Archambault, Greg Zakarian. So you know who you're talking with up here. All right, so that's my introduction for now. I'd like to introduce Clena, who will begin the first part of the presentation.
Hi, everybody. It's such a beautiful night tonight. Thanks for spending it in here with us. We hope you find this informative to help you make a decision for these important questions coming up. My name is Clena. I've been in town about 20 odd years. I have two sons in 5th and 11th grade, and I've been on the Finance Committee for 2 years now. So as Ray said, we did try to keep the graphs and figures brief, but it's finance, so we have some, and we had lots of data sources and helpers putting this together. Our town accountant, Leslie, our town administrator, Heather, Mr. Maha, and the school committee. We looked at old meeting reports and Massachusetts websites for some of the sources of information, and the SWAT team was super helpful, and they did a really nice job with the contract negotiations this year for trash. So what we're going to go through, just a couple slides of what is Prop 2.5 anyway. We'll go through the operating budget and the reasons for the gap that we have this year. And we'll tell you about the options that you'll see at town meeting next week and at the election in a couple weeks. So this chart shows our tax rate per $1,000 assessed value. West Boylston is the green bar, and the other bars are communities surrounding us. So Rutland there has the lowest tax rate, and the highest bar is Paxton. We are slightly above average, but in the middle of the pack. This is the tax rate, so the other part of the equation that informs your tax bill is your assessed value of your home. And so some of these towns have higher average assessed values and some have lower, but in terms of tax rate, we're slightly above average currently. What is Prop 2.5? So Prop 2.5 is a Massachusetts regulation, and it limits the amount of tax that municipalities can charge its residents in 2 ways. The first 2.5 is the levy ceiling. Levy just means tax, so tax ceiling is 2.5% of all the assessed values of all the properties in town, right? West Boylston has plenty of capacity. We are not near our tax ceiling, so we don't need to worry about that. The other 2.5% is the levy limit or tax limit. And the way this is calculated is that each year our new levy limit is whatever our levy was last year plus 2.5%. Right? And so when the town administrator is putting together the town budget, she can ask for an increased tax of up to 2.5%, and that would require only approval at town meeting as when you approve the operational budget. If the town needs or has goals that require more than 2.5% over last year, then the voters have to authorize an override. And so the override is authorizing the town to raise more than 2.5%. This year, the override would authorize the town to raise $725,000 in addition to the 2.5% levy increase from last year. The levy increase from last year without the override is about $530,000. Okay. One other way that the tax levy can increase for a town is through new growth. So if there are new developments, new homes, new commercial buildings, that adds to the tax base and would also increase the tax revenue available. Our tax growth this year is about $70,000, which is about half of what it was the prior year, so that's not helping us out much this year. One further point, you will see on signs and you'll hear people say perhaps permanent override. This can be misleading, so I want to make sure that you understand what part of that is true and what part of that could be misleading, right? So let's time travel to May 2026 and look again at our levy limit definition. So if the override passes this year, our levy will be increased by 2.5% plus $725,000, and next year the new levy limit will be 2.5% above that. And so that $725,000 keeps going. It is in that way permanent. Where I think that can be misleading is that you probably all intuitively would not expect the tax next year to decrease by $725,000. And so you might then think that the permanent part is the override part, and that's not true. When you authorize the override, you are authorizing it for this year only, for $725,000 only. If the town has a gap next year that's greater than 2.5%, the town will have to again request an override at the election in order to reach that gap.
So you're coming back every year for an override? Please hold your questions until the end.
Well, we're here this year for this year. We can't see the future. But if there were to be a gap next year, then you would have the opportunity to vote again next year. So you would have that decision in your hands next year. All right, so moving into the operating budget. What's in the operating budget? So on the revenue side, we have tax. We've just talked quite a bit about that. We have state funding, and that can come in many different ways, grants and allowances. That has been relatively stable to slightly down. And sometimes there are one-time funds. Because of COVID, there was a lot of one-time funds that was available to municipalities, and those are no longer in the budget. On the expense side, we have programs and services, the schools, the trash, the fire, etc. We have things that we are required to offer. There are several school required mandates. There are things like sewer drain upgrades. Those are required by law. The funds that go with them may or may not come in the same amount that we need to pay in order to do them. We have retirement and insurance for our employees and our prior employees. And those have been increasing quite dramatically, which probably makes sense to you. I know my homeowner's insurance and car insurance and everything else has been rising quite dramatically also. And inflation, 2.5% might cover inflation some years, but recently it hasn't been. So inflation has been growing as well. I'm going to turn it over to Greg to go into some more details.
Thank you, Clea. All right, good evening, everybody. Oh, thank you. I get the honor and privilege of talking about some of the revenue sources, the budget drivers, and some of the expenses this year. This graph here gives us kind of an overview of where most of the town's income comes from. As you can see, the largest piece is 73.2% comes from taxation. That's our largest piece of the pie. We do get some state aid through what's called our cherry sheets, which we get through the Department of Local Services. Tends to be about 13%. Local receipts, I believe this is our excise taxes, fees, and stuff like that charged by the town. And then we do have some reserve income, which we try not to take any major money out of if possible, because it tends to be our rainy day fund. Some of our budget growth drivers for this year. So if we started with general government, we're actually going down a little over 0.5%. Public safety is up about 10%. I believe, if memory serves correctly, that's putting in a second shift at the fire department and may include a new cruiser as well. Public works is actually looking at going down about 29%, but that would be removing trash from the budget line item. Human services staying about even, and culture and recreation is just going up a nominal percentage. Education is only going up on average about 2%, and we did want to give props to the schools for doing their part to try and close that budget gap as well. We know it can be tough. And as far as our other discretionary things go, this again comes back to our insurance, benefits, COLA adjustments, stuff like that, stuff that we really don't have a lot of control over. So that's another big piece of the pie at about 8.16%. So our expenses in total for this year, I won't point out all of them, but some of the bigger ones. General government is about 1.4 million, up about 2.7%. Public safety, up about 4.2 million, up about 13. Education has stayed relatively flat at about a plus 2.1, so about 14.4 million. Public works, about 2.92 million, up about 3.5%. Human services, this is your veterans benefits, your library and what have you, up about 6.2%. Culture and rec, about 574,000, up 3.6. And then our other things such as our benefits, insurance, debt that we have to make payments to. Again, this is the one we really can't do a heck of a lot about, is up about 8.2%. So what are some of the key reasons for the gap? So first off, when we look at the school budget, it's flat state funding, modest school choice funding. There really haven't been a lot of inflationary increases prior last year. So essentially it's a +2 decrease. They could be looking at some layoffs on the school side. We do have some contractual obligations as well. Our growth of insurance and retirement costs, COLA adjustments. Our fire department, the chief has been trying to restructure from really an on-call availability to having 2 shifts or 2 crews rather on at the station at all times. Our trash, we have a new contract coming up, and I'll let our town administrator talk a little bit more about that one. On our one-time funds, so our ARPA and the ESSR Those are coming to a close. We're not getting those any longer. And our new growth really hasn't been that big year over year. And unfortunately, it's gone down this year as well. So lessons learned from fiscal year 2025. What did we learn from last year? So last year we had, or I should say the town had requested, I believe it was $4 million over a 4 or 5 year spread. And we learned very quickly that that was not a popular idea in the town. General sentiment was that voters would lose some control over that budget oversight process, which was a message which was heard loud and clear. And voters believed this placed too much control in the hands of the administration as to budget priorities for too long a time. So that's why this year it's a more focused override request for a much smaller amount of money. And Ray, I think this is you next.
Thank you, Greg. All right, so we'll get into the details of the override and non-override budget in a moment. But typically, whenever you put up a couple of choices, the first questions you get are, did you consider X? And X depends on whatever your personal area of interest is. So we wanted to really spend a fair amount of time taking a look at what other options existed. So one possibility is to just try to close that gap using reserve funds, using stabilization, free cash, insurance overlays, those kinds of things. A fiscally extremely poor practice and would lessen our ability to deal with unforeseen issues in the future. Could also have an impact on our bond rating, our borrowing expenses, and really lessens our ability to deal with issues in the future. We looked at further cuts to the schools. I mean, we looked at all departments that had a budget physically large enough to support something on the order of the $725,000 deficit we have. The schools, as was alluded to earlier, had already put in $545,000 worth of cuts, which was roughly 9 professionals, I believe. So they'd already done a proactive cut in anticipation that this was going to be a difficult budget year. So kudos to them for doing that. But we looked at, well, what if we did more? So to close a $725,000 budget gap, if you look at your average teacher salary of roughly $83,000, you can do the math. We're talking about losing another 6 to 12 professionals, depending on exactly the ones that are chosen. Our feeling was that was going to be far too damaging to the schools, and in kind of related fashion, impact property values. If people perceive the town to have a weak school system, you're gonna feel it in your wallet one way or another. So we eliminated that. We took a look at, okay, let's just close the senior center and the library. Together, their aggregate budgets are right around $725,000. But it's a false sense of security. If we close both facilities, we still have insurance costs and building heating and maintenance to the tune of about another $200,000. So not only do we lose those services for citizens of town, we also impact things like your ability to borrow books from another town. The C.W. Morris program, if the library becomes decertified, is gone. So this seemed to be far too draconian and would really impact a large portion of town. We looked at increasing trash bag fees. But when you look at that in detail, we looked at rough number, about 3 times our current bag cost, just as a trial balloon. We're currently among the lowest per bag fee in the area. Tripling them would put us amongst the highest. But there's also a false sense of economy there too. For all of you that remember the last trash bag increase we had, there was a rush at Stop and Shop to buy every bag you could find to buy. Taking a look at some of the numbers from the SWAT team, their estimate was about 40% of the volume that would be used in the coming fiscal year would be bought in advance. So it might create a little bump up front, but to close the gap for fiscal '26, it wouldn't do it. So we'd have to supplement that with other funds. There's also reports from that the SWAT committee had circulated, just talking about what is the impact of having such a high per bag cost, and it really affects utilization of recycling utility. So there were a lot of reasons not to like that one. So we set that aside. We looked at really severe things, like what if we just cut third shift from the public safety offerings, the police and the fire department? Again, their budgets are large enough to show that kind of a discount. But the reality is, the way the fire contract is written, we physically can't do that. And the police department by itself wouldn't offer enough cost savings to close even a third of that gap. So if you set aside the common sense of whether or not you would choose to delete a shift of public safety, it didn't make sense economically. In talking with the police chief, he said third shift showed roughly 2,000 calls that they handled, 2,000. So those 2,000 calls would go unanswered. So again, we eliminated that. Not on here, we also took a look at just more severe cuts to all department budgets to close that 725,000 gap. And we'll be talking about substantial reductions in the time of town hall offices. The schools would have been another $300,000 or $400,000. Again, just the impact on the nature of life in town, the fabric that we've all come to enjoy, would be really tarnished. So, at town meeting, you're going to be given two choices. The first choice is a Proposition 2.5 override to the tune of about $725,000. The second one would be a budget cut approach to balance the budget, and that would include the elimination of trash service, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, and further reductions to specific departments. So for the Prop 2.5 override, again, we're proposing $725,000. So they'll show up on your property tax bill. It doesn't correct the current operating deficit, which I'll talk about in a moment. So another override is likely for next year. I think Mr. Toppin kind of called that out earlier. It's a reality, and I'll talk about that, why. What do we got? Well, we continue with a trash pickup, centralized. There'll be much limited service cuts, and it postpones addressing structural deficits, but it lets us readdress those next year. So what is it going to cost you? So the average home in town is roughly $518,000. For that home, it's $239 cost. Keep that number in mind, $239 to the average home. So if we take a look at this option B, the service cuts, budget cuts, we're talking about eliminating a police cruiser, reducing shifts of fire department, another $42,000 from the schools, $17,000 from the library, veteran services. You can read the rest of these. So everybody would feel a little bit of pain, but we could manage it if we have to. To go along with that is defunding of centralized trash pickup. So right now, the cost per year for the contract that's pending is $652,000. But we do get $215,000 a year in bag revenue. So the savings we get from this one is, in aggregate, is $437,000. So why even propose this? Well, it is the cleanest option. It doesn't create job loss. We don't have to pay unemployment compensation and the like. So it has minimal impact on other town departments and public services. All true, but here's the kicker. Overall, it's going to cost each homeowner roughly 3 times what you're currently paying. You would have to hire private trash services to the tune of about $800 a year versus roughly $250 we pay per home right now. And those trash services, and this is based on experiential information from other towns, typically they'll pick up trash weekly and they would pick up recycling every other week. So you're paying a lot more and getting less. Actually, I'm going to pause here to the issue of the structural deficit. I don't have a slide for this, but I just want to talk you through really the most fundamental points. So our increase in revenues per year is limited by Prop 2.5 largely. So 3/4 of the town's revenue is driven by Prop 2.5. So that means right now we could realize $533,000 in new revenues, or in new tax ability from property tax. So that's side A. Side B is known increases. 2 categories, so I'm only going to ask you to remember 3 numbers here. The aggregate of all salaries in town is about $16 million. Now, we've just gone through a contract negotiation. We agreed on 2%, but as a practical matter, when you figure in lane changes and step increases, it's about 3.5% per year total in increasing salaries. So that's nominally $600,000 by itself. Again, but that one item is already bigger than the amount of additional tax we can get from Prop 2.5. Add to that the other non-negotiables. So we're talking about things that we can predict easily, like debt service and loan payments, that sort of thing. But the insurance costs and the retirement assessment together, $645,000 increase over last year. So we've got nominally $1.2 million in additional expenses each year, and the ability to add in only $540,000 per year in additional revenue. $700,000 deficit pretty much guaranteed. So we don't have a simple solution. Override is the tool that we have, so that's what's being proposed. So I'm sure there'll be questions on that later, but I'm going to hand this over to Kalina to bring home the rest of the presentation.
We realized we're not giving you a lot of good news. Option 1 is terrible and option 2 is terribler. And the grid of options that Ray went through that we, brainstormed as what else could we do were even worse. So this is where we are. So the next steps, if you wish to support the override, then next week at town meeting, we'll come to town meeting, and you will vote yes for Article 9, Motion A, which will be for the override. And you'll come back to the town election and vote for the override at town election. We also ask you to vote for Motion B of Article 9, which is the non-override budget. Even though you're in support of the override, it's important that you also vote yes for the non-override, because if both fail, then we don't have a budget, and that's not an option. We have to have a budget, and we have to have a budget to keep services going at all, okay? So it's important that you vote for both, even though you support the override. If you want to defeat the override, come to the town meeting on Monday, and you're going to vote no for Article 9, Motion A, and you're going to vote yes for Article 9, Motion B. And show up at the town election and vote no for the override. Okay? So if you're supporting the override or not supporting the override, come to the town meeting, vote in the election. If you're supporting the override, vote for the override at town meeting next week, but also vote for Motion B without the override so that we at least have some budget at the end of this process. So I alluded to this. If the budget doesn't pass, then we're in limbo. And we would have to come back to a special town meeting to figure out what to do. So that could be a stressful couple months. So other considerations, Ray spoke to the structural issue. There are goals that the town has, like potentially a new school, new DPW building, new fire building. Those are all larger projects that, this override doesn't do anything for or against those. They're separate issues, and they would be separate debt exclusion votes potentially in the future. Also, in year 2 of the trash contract, we'll be required to purchase or rent trash totes, receptacles, and so that's an expense that we will have to figure out next year as well. Okay. Ray mentioned this, and everything is preliminary, so the state final numbers will actually come later, so these are best anticipations by our town professionals. And if anything changes, we'll have to share that. So the finance, as I said, we recognize these are, we're not bringing you great news tonight. The finance committee, having been through all of the options, all of the spreadsheets, talking to all of the department heads, talking to SWAT, talking to the town administrator, talking with the select board, we do unanimously endorse the override. We believe it's the best option for the community at large, for our own personal pocketbooks, right? Because we won't have to pay for private trash, and a responsible decision for the town this year. With that, we'll take questions. Or is Heather speaking?
Yeah, so one last point before we take questions, sorry. Heather Butler, our town administrator, does have some information about a trash alternative that if an override is passed that she plans to pursue. So Heather, maybe you want to come up and talk about that a little bit? Heather, would you rather?
Okay, so today is May 14th. It means I have been your town administrator for 30 days. Yesterday was rough. I will not lie, the socials almost got me. But I came back today because I am truly committed to making sure that we get through town meeting successfully with a budget. And I understand 100% that the news you're getting tonight is a little dismal. And there's nothing that I can do about it, nothing that this group can do about it, and really there's nothing that any of you can do about it. It is called Proposition 2.5. Every single community in the state of Massachusetts is running into the same problem at the same time. If you're reading the newspapers, you're seeing headlines, and I think Rep. O'Day could agree, we're seeing it everywhere, right? So it's nothing that anybody here did right or wrong. It's just where we are. I do want to talk a little bit about the slide that the Finance Committee showed you, but first I also want to say that that was probably the most eloquent, succinct way of describing the levy limit. You should really do a video, post it on DLS. It was really well done. Thank you. But I will say that the slide that demonstrated what we've looked at and what we have ruled out is important because it demonstrates that we recognize that there's some really core values that your community has in your library and your senior center and the services that you have with your parks and you got beautiful roads, some of the nicest roads I've seen in the state, and I've been from one end to the other working. You have such a lovely community, and to take huge bites at any of those services, it would really alter the community that you all love and have chosen to live in. So back to trash. I've talked a great deal with the team at SWAT. They have negotiated an incredibly positive contract. The pricing is very good. I saw all of the revisions, and SWAT did a fantastic job. I'm not going to call Norma out specifically, but maybe a little bit. She did a great job of making sure that every version that came back was in the better to best interest of you, the residents. That being said, I cannot legally sign a contract if I don't have money to pay for it, right? Just like you can't write it, well, you shouldn't write a check that you don't have money in your bank account to pay for. Same principle. Unless we take those huge cuts from every other department and again devastate the services and the programming that you really enjoy as residents of the town of West Boylston, I can't sign that contract. So what I'm asking, and I know this is an ask, it's worse than getting a credit card, but I'm asking you to support the override. Year one, the money will be used very specifically to fund and sign that trash contract and preserve the curbside pay-as-you-throw program that is a model for the state. It's an excellent program. The money is on point. It's a good contract. Then I take the next 9 months, I think is what I can afford. I work with the Finance Committee, with the Select Board, with SWAT, with any of you, and we look at all of the alternatives to make sure that trash, and again, I know this is last week, this killed. Like, everybody loved this idea. This week, not so much. But taking the trash out of your operational budget, right, where it's causing this huge pinch point that we're going to be back here every 5 years dangling trash over your heads. I got 5 years because I'm going to sign a 5-year contract. But in 5 years, what do you think I'm going to come back with? Trash again, because it's the easy thing to cut. So what I'd like you to do is really move it out of your operational budget, look at an enterprise fund, which is a self-funded, very similar to your water, sewer, your electric bills, right? You don't see anybody up here telling you you're not going to get your electricity, or we're not threatening to take away your water or your sewer because you're paying for it, right? You're paying for it outside of your general property taxes. So again, not good news, because I'm asking you for an override. I'm saying, yes, please increase your taxes by the $230 per average household. And then I'm telling you that, yes, I am proposing to take trash out of your budget and put it into an enterprise fund, and I'm going to send you a bill for it. So, total transparency, there's 100 details that I would have to work out with the help of everybody here to make sure that that is a reasonable cost, that it fits into your budgets. But I think it really would be a way to sustain that program forever, because once it's enterprise, it doesn't go back. And it really does change your number for next year too. They've said that there's an override next year, even if we pass the override this year. That is not an incorrect statement. But the number changes, right? Because if we take the 463 or 436, 433, if we take that number out, that really does change what the deficit is for next year, right? I mean, I'm a town administrator. I don't do math. But I really think it's the best way forward for West Boylston to get past this issue where we're using trash as a political item. It shouldn't be. You all voted for it in 1991. Who was anybody here in 91 that voted for it? All right. So you know what I'm saying. Like, when you voted for that, you had no expectation that in 2025, someone would be back here saying, guess what? We can't afford it. So I do hear that. I respect that. I'm asking that you do support the override. Let me sign the contract. We can move forward. Again, no easy answers after that, but I do think it's the best of all the bad options. That being said, I will hand the microphone back unless somebody has a specific question about trash, because I'm too fried from the town meeting warrant put together process to answer questions about anything else. Yeah.
So, if we pass the override, Okay, you get the money for the contract for 5 years.
Yeah.
Does that still mean that we're gonna be billed on a monthly basis personally? Or bi-monthly or whatever?
So the way that
Off
we,
the trash bag game?
I can answer that with a mostly confident answer. It would be my intention that in the first year of that contract, before we have to purchase the carts, that I would change the program from being an expense that we pay for in the general budget. I would move it out into an enterprise and yes, monthly billing or whatever system of billing. So the money that you're voting for the override will stay in the general budget, right? So that 725, the first year, yes, it's funding trash. After that, it's going to offset the number of the deficit that we know is still there. As the Finance Committee just told you, next year's deficit is another $700,000+. That's with this deficit that you were hoping we're gonna match with the override this year. But if we free up the money, if we take the trash money out of the budget, and again, follow me with my Lucy math, but it does create a bucket there. We'll fill that bucket right back up again with other stuff, but it's gonna mean a lower override for next year.
Heather, can you clarify, in moving to that enterprise fund, when would potential monthly charges start?
I could not answer that because I think there's so many details between now. It would not be until the following fiscal year, but when in FY 27 it started, I couldn't tell you. But you'd have a whole year, all of FY 26, where the town is paying for your trash, right? The whole FY 26, I would not even begin to be ready to bill you, but probably FY 27, so that would be July of 26.
Okay, so the question I have again now is that has this committee looked at other trash companies throughout the state, or even New Hampshire, or Vermont, doesn't matter?
Yep.
I mean, there are hundreds of them out there.
Well, there are hundreds of them out there, but not hundreds of them that are going to be servicing this particular area. And SWAT has done all of that homework. They have worked with other because you split your trash services between collections and disposal. So the contract that we're talking about is for the curbside pickup, which is handled by Republic. Casella handles your disposal. So they have, by piecemealing it, they really have done their due diligence in making sure that each of those, instead of it being one lump sum with one company, they've really done the homework and dug in to make sure that they're getting the best rate for the town of West Boylston.
Yeah, Heather, if I could just
Yeah.
add a clarifier here.
Of course.
As far as expectations,
The expectation is that Heather and her team would bring a ballot question to the, not ballot question, a warrant question to the fall town meeting. Right now, we don't have the details, so we can only make hand-waving arguments and estimates. In the fall, there'll be actual numbers to look at, and you'll have something to really sink your teeth into.
So you'll be taking it off budget and we'll be paying for it off budget, and then you'll just keep spending in the regular budget. But you won't be able to hold it over our heads because, as she said, we won't be here holding it over your heads. And that's what they're doing. They're holding trash over our heads. So they don't have to cut any other department. If you cut the school department 4%, and that 2% decrease that you put up on the screen is not true, it's just because they're getting less of an increase that they want. I mean, they get a 2% increase, right? If you decrease that 4%, which is really only a 2% decrease, you can close the budget gap. 100% of the people use the trash in this town, and that's why you're holding it over our heads, maybe a little bit less than 100%. So I think you need, the problem isn't that we don't have enough money for the government, the problem is we have too much government for the money. And I propose and hope and encourage everybody to vote no on both the articles, and then we'll figure it out from there. But you're not gonna take our trash away. We're not gonna, the town is not gonna pass that.
Thank
We
you.
lost 400 to 100 last time. I mean, I don't think it's gonna be much better this time.
Thank you.
Yeah, you didn't follow the presentation last week.
Yes. We bring that right up. You're very tall.
I think, no, I went to the meeting last week, she goes to the No, I appreciate that, and I appreciate everything you guys, finance committee does. I don't criticize everybody, I realize you're in a situation, but I went to the presentation last week, and presentation is a little different than. Well, I understand. Last Wednesday, Thursday, Ray, Chris, these guys are really good, and I appreciate everything you've done. I live in Angel Brook. I raise the issue about with senior citizens. We get really no services other than trash. And I think the presentation last week said that the simple answer to the budget problem is trash. So we're getting rid of trash. Okay. Couple comments. The presentation earlier about you either vote for the override or and if you vote against the override, you vote for the budget. I just totally disagree. I agree with this gentleman where there is an option for voting no for both. I realize that that's a problem for the town because it's going to require you to take a hard look at the budget. And that's what I suggest because I'm at Angel Brook. We pay over $1 million to the town. We only get trash. I realize in response to my comments last week, you mentioned we have the senior center, we have the library, we get police fire. Police and fire is important, no question. But we're on private property. We pay our snow removal, lighting, whatever. We have to pay for replacing the asphalt. We get no services from the town other than trash and police and fire. Police and fire are fabulous, no question. I don't question that. And I applaud all the efforts that the finance committee does and the town does. But I really suggest you take a hard look at the budget. And I really disagree with the comment that if you vote no for the override, you vote for the budget. No, because the budget's gonna take trash away and a bunch of other things. So I really think the finance committee should explain to the people there is another option of voting no and no, which I'm going to do. And I suggest the man below back here, I agree with him. But anyway,
Actually, I'm sorry.
I will wrap it up.
Because the school committee is taking this road,
I'll wrap it up.
We're going to move to the auditorium. We have to take.
I'll wrap it
Just a
up.
heads
Okay.
up.
But I appreciate everything you guys do. I realize you're in a bind. And I realize, I think the comments last week is too late to change the budget. But anyway, there is another option.
So we're going to move across the hall, but just so you're aware, that has the assessment.
Because not only do you not get a budget that funds roughly everything, so the 2.5 override would fund basically the budget that is recommended by the town administrator, been endorsed by finance committee. So you don't get that budget, plus you don't get your trash service. Now, if you vote for this, choose not to vote for the second one, you don't get your trash, plus you get additional cuts.
Of FY25 and goes until June 30th of 2026, okay? So you'd have a full year in which, should the override be supported, and I have the funds available on June 26th or June 4th, depending on how you want to calculate the success of the override, which would be with a ballot. If I can sign a contract, then trash is paid for and covered by the town for that until June 30th of 2026, okay? What I'm saying is that town meeting, not the town meeting on Monday, but next May's town meeting, there'll be a warrant article that I will ask, hopefully, if the numbers work out. And again, I've been here 30 days, so do I have a great, perfectly laid out plan that I can put on PowerPoint for you? Absolutely not, sir. But what we will do is we will work to have a warrant article on that May town meeting that will present an enterprise fund, and it will outline the billing structure. And we will be having these meetings all over again next, hopefully we get started in March, April, where we have all of these conversations, and those numbers are known. We try to do our very best to make the numbers work so that they're a reasonable number. And then we vote on it at the next town meeting to create an enterprise fund. So you will have another bite of the apple at this. I can't make an enterprise fund on my own. Only town meeting can do that. That comes back to you in May. And to say that you don't have services beyond the trash, I beg your, I just have to say, as soon as you leave your driveway, you're on town roads and you're taking advantage of all of those services that everybody else does. But I think the woman behind you and then this woman would like to have a chance, if that's okay.
I want to address, I think the question where you might be interchanging a couple of numbers. So the new trash contract, I believe, is $645,000 for the year.
That's gross, right?
That's the gross contract. As far as the cost per person,
When you take the net trash bags, that's 433, if I recall.
if you net it down, yeah, it's 433. But the cost per person is,
It's not 650, it's 433.
the cost per person is $250. The increase would be $240. So it seemed like you're going back and forth between a couple of different numbers.
433 is the number you presented last week, which I'm told is correct, is what I was told.
Well, yeah, I hope so.
From SWAT, that's the number from SWAT.
Okay. All right, please.
Hi, thank you. I'm June Hubbard Ward. I live at 15 Kings Mountain Drive. I think this is an excellent proposal for the override this year. I did attend all the educational information about last year's, and I thought that was a bit of an overreach. I think the $725,000 override is the perfect solution for this town, for this year, for this budget cycle. And I would encourage everyone to vote yes on both the annual town meeting warrant article and go to the ballot and vote yes. That's what it takes for the override to pass. I think we all know how to vote no. I think that's clear. So the best information from this meeting is that this override increases the average single-family home by $239. Your alternative is $800 for a carrier to come to your house, right? Private pay. So I do want to point out that with the trash system, the pay-as-you-throw system, which is an excellent system, you retain control. Municipalities are in the business of delivering service, and you maintain control of that service. You can limit the number of trucks that go over your road. You could go to a bi-weekly pickup. You could contract with another provider. You know, you have all the control. You sign the contract. When you take it to a privatization, you lose that control. Further, I want to say that I think your new town administrator's idea for an enterprise fund for trash is excellent. I've heard budget meeting after budget meeting talk about losing trash. If you want to choose to use the service and it's an enterprise fund, you choose to pay for it, like your water and your sewer and your light bill. If you don't want to use that service, if you live in a condo at Hazelbrook, you don't want to, you don't have to. So I think that's an excellent proposal for the town to move forward and get off this trash cycle budget, idea of cutting it. And I think they've worked really hard to be able to bring you a budget that they continue to provide that service. So I would give you credit for that proposal. I think it's just, the future is what the future is. If we have to come back and deal with trash next year, an enterprise funds next 20 years. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I get a turn now. All right, I just wanted to say I'm also in support of removing trash from the budget because I think otherwise people are going to fight with us year after year. Like you said, then we can choose as individuals whether we want to use it or not. I'd also say for some of the people that are against doing this, that I would urge people, I'm in favor of it. I say vote yes for the override for option A. I think that I don't want to lose that service, and like some people said, as soon as we lose it, it's gone, and then being able to negotiate to get it back is going to be that charter. The other thing that seemed to be kind of confusing that I would urge the people who are against it to look at is I think it was about 3 select board meetings ago. It was a combined SWAC and select board meeting. And they discussed in really great detail that I love to hear all of the different ways they tried to get the contract. You know, different providers and what the cost was. And they really like spelled out all of the ways that this was the best option, the cheapest option, and all of the work that they did to get to that point. And I'd also say that the finance committee did an amazing job with this presentation. I'm not sure when people are saying, you know, let's vote no for everything, you know, find somewhere to find this budget. Like, you just showed us all of the numbers. There's nowhere that it comes from. It's not, you know, just go back to the table. It's cut other services that are worse. So I would just say, you know, my personal vote will definitely be for the override, and I would urge people to do that, because I think it's our best move forward, even if it hurts a little on our taxes.
Thank you.
With all due respect to the lady that just spoke 2 times, to point out Angelbrook and to say that with respect to Angelbrook, you know, if they don't want trash, you know, heck with that. I mean, I pay over $7,000 a year. I said this last week. Angelbrook pays over $1 million a year in real estate taxes. And Hillside, they have 112 units. Their valuations are similar to us. There's $2 million from the senior citizens paying to support what this lady spoke to. And I really resent the fact that she pointed out Angelbrook, because we pay over.
You mentioned Angelbrook. You said
Please address your questions to the board and not to each other.
Well, that's because I live.
That's my only point out. Okay.
Where do you live? Okay.
Excuse me, please stop this conversation.
She's
Thank
making
you.
it personal.
She should not be.
She should
I'm
not be.
asking you both just to address the board.
I totally respect that, and I never made it personal. She made it personal. I didn't.
She addressed the.
Please address your comments to the board.
So she's addressing your point.
No, I need.
I think this gentleman in the quote with
The reason why I mentioned Angelbrook is because last week they asked you to mention your name and your address. That's all they did. All I'm saying is I'm an Angelbrook resident. I didn't say that. And the other thing, I didn't say people should vote no on both. I just said that you should explain that people can vote no on both. This lady explained you can vote, if you vote no on one, you need to vote yes on the budget. No, that's not correct. You can vote no on both. You should explain the results and explain both on both. That's not my point.
Yeah, that is a fair comment, and we will revisit the language on the slide. We did talk about that we can't not have a budget, but we didn't talk about how to get there.
Yes, exactly. And last week, you got, like I said, the finance committee, I have no disagreement. I think you guys are doing a wonderful job. All I'm explaining is that, you know, we should give the people the facts to make a decision. But I resent the fact that I mentioned the Angelbrook because that's where I live. Because last week you asked for the name and the address. And I simply, Chris, Rick, we talked about it. I explained where I live. I wasn't saying Angelbrook should get any benefit more than anybody else. I just mentioned it as where I live.
I think we all understood that, so thank you for that.
And I resent the fact that she pointed to Angelbrook as being something.
There's other people that want to talk.
So,
Go right ahead.
and I will mention one more thing. To the scenario where we don't have a budget that is approved at town meeting, there's a no on both, understand that we've taken roughly 6 months to develop the current budget that's in front of you. If there's a no vote on both, you're giving us 2 weeks to revamp the entire budget. It's a process that would be a little scary to me. I hope we don't go there.
So 2 weeks to revamp the
Plan
budget.
C. You've got Plan A, you've got Plan B.
I'm sorry, Plan C.
But
Then you have 30 days.
yeah, 2 weeks to develop a new budget, 2 weeks to convene a special town meeting, and the likelihood of getting that all done in time to engage a trash contractor by the end of June is going to be very challenging at best. Thanks. Sorry.
Larry Moy, Prospect Street.
Thank you for your patience.
Okay. Can we get this posted on the town website? If it's, I don't think it is. Your stuff is posted. I saw your 3 documents.
We would love to post it on the town website.
Okay, good.
Yes, and we were holding off until actually having the presentation so that
if people had questions, they could look at the video and get the context that all the slides are presented on. If you just look at a slide deck, there's ample room for misinterpretation, and one, it's at least have the context there before we circulate it.
So I was gonna go to, first question I was gonna ask was relative to if we don't get a budget. If we say no, we're not gonna vote for the override, or perhaps in my opinion, at least even worse, we don't want a budget or an override. Then practically speaking, in July 1st, are we going to have trash pickup, or is it everybody's problem? It's all for one, one for all, and find some dumpster.
We are in the middle of Never Never Land, if that's the case. The contract expires June 25th, if I remember.
But if the
So,
override doesn't pass, just like it didn't last year, but we have a budget, and trash is removed, are we really expecting most of the residents to go out and find somebody to pick up their trash?
that's a real
By
problem.
themselves? Sorry.
That is the reality. If I'm not able to sign that contract after a successful town meeting with a successful override and a successful ballot on June 3rd, I can't sign that contract, there will be no trash July 1st. But to the vote no, I can't imagine what your community, what the impact of that would be to your community. And if there is a no and we cannot reconvene with a special town meeting, Town Hall is closed July 1st. Your DPW is closed July 1st. Your fire services are closed July 1st. Your police department is closed July 1st. We cannot function without a budget. We cannot spend one nickel without an appropriation. The only party that can appropriate money is town meeting. If you don't vote for a budget at the town meeting, everything stops July 1st. And that is a very, very real statement. And I'm not trying to be scary, I'm just saying that's what it is. So from what I'm hearing, I better have a plan C.
So at the town meeting, though, we're not going to be, like we didn't last year, it's going to be choice A or choice B or neither choice. But we're not going to say, take $10 from this fund and move it into that fund, that's what we all want to do. We're really voting on the warrants as they're listed, correct? And then I guess my last question, back to trash, because we just have more trash here, is why did the town discard the idea of raising the bag prices sufficiently that they completely pay for the program? I know how expensive they would be, but what we're saying is trash is expensive. When I throw out my bags of trash, I pay up $2 at Stop and Shop, but it really costs 10 somewhere to throw that.
It's a reasonable question. So when we were looking at that, we would still have to supplement in fiscal year 26 with probably 300,000 or so in one-time sources, stabilization and work. But it would also impact utilization. And there's a detailed slideshow that Norman has forwarded to us from the kind of state authorities on pay-as-you-throw programs. And the utilization, even at the 3 times cost for the bags, is going to be a real problem. So I don't know that we recognize the revenue that we
trash if you
expect.
don't throw it out? I would think utilization is how much trash you make.
And the short answer is that would be considered a revenue, right? An anticipated revenue. We really would have no idea whether or not you and you and you and you will really support a triple bag fee. You may say, absolutely not, and you're going to find an alternative, and then my revenue that I'm anticipating to cover the cost of that contract, maybe I get a third of it. That's the reality.
And it's not like the town has been sleeping. I mean, the SWAT team has been working on this. We did not anticipate benefit costs to increase double digits in the current year. The insurance advisory group renegotiated some of the benefit packages for employees, so the employees are actually paying more out of pocket. But it's still, as Ray alluded to, a $645,000 increase year over year. That alone takes any 2.5 increase from our budget. So that was not, obviously we have a mandate to work on that this year. Thanks.
Hello, Mark Freeland, Pine Drive, select board member, and other things. What is the reality of not signing the contract and the SWAT? I would like to sing the praises a little bit of the SWAT negotiation, that it's a great deal, a great contract, all that kind of thing. What's the consequence of not being able to sign and trying to recover the following year? I mean, I would like that, not that it's another punishment or another bad thing, but it's just, what's the reality of that?
I would ask Norma if you don't mind answering that directly.
It might not even be known.
I think there's
I
an,
can't tell you 100% what that would be, but what I can tell you is that several of the towns around us are trying desperately to get to a municipal program, and they're struggling to get there. I don't know how we are then going to be viewed as to changing our mind in a year and wanting to go back. That concerns me.
we may have real issues getting bids at that point.
Yeah, we only got 3 bids for this year. And 5 years ago, when we negotiated the contract, we only got 3 bids. And I have to be honest, both times, it was at least one of those bids was not even remotely serious.
Yeah.
That's all we're getting. So I
think it's a great negotiation. I think you did a great job, and the SWAT did what they were tasked to do.
Based on our size, based on what our volumes are, I mean, we're just not like the town everybody's trying to get.
I don't want it to be an if this, like an important point to make, that if we don't do it this once, it's a lost opportunity. It's going to be more expensive.
Well, I think there's a possibility of it being a lost opportunity. We don't know how they're going to react.
And it would certainly be more expensive. I mean,
That's what I mean. It's a worse problem later than
Yeah,
now.
absolutely. Absolutely. Think of,
Any business, I mean, when you're renewing the contract, or you're a brand new customer, and when you're providing a commodity like trash collection, which is both tipping fees and at the recycling center, it's a much higher expense to start than to continue what you already have.
And I just wanted to point that out, that it's not easily recoverable.
Yep, thank you. Thank you.
And another point I want to
You know where we are.
Yeah, and by way of introduction, Norma is the SWAT chair, so you understand who's giving you the answer.
Hi, June Hubbard, Ward 15, Kings Mountain Drive again. And I certainly didn't want to disrespect Angel Brook. I should have said all condo owners could choose to participate in the enterprise fund or buy a private contractor. My point now is there's been some confusion about whether or not you have the authority to sign the contract. If you look at the proposed budget with the 3 columns, it's the existing budget that's in place now. There's a column, motion A, that includes the $652,000 for the trash that would allow your officials to sign that contract starting July 1st. And then there's the budget if you have to cut, if the override fails. That's budget B. That brings that line item to 0. That trash line item goes to 0 if the override doesn't fail. That's why you'd have no authority to sign the contract. All the other departments maybe get cut a few $1,000s, your fire department still exists, your police still exists, they get cut a few $1,000s, but not completely wiped out. So just to stop any confusion about what happens if you don't vote the override. There's option A, there's option B. If you vote B, the trash line item goes to 0, and you wouldn't have the authority to sign the contract. And you aren't the biggest player in the field of trash contracting. So you don't command the industry, you're not at the pinnacle of whose business they're looking to get. So I would say that would just complicate an already difficult topic for this town. So I would encourage everyone to vote for the override and vote for that service, and allow the town officials that breathing room to move to an enterprise fund, which would serve this town so much better.
Thank you.
And I'll repeat the offer that I just made about, there is all of the budget documents, every department I have printed out. If anybody would like to come in before town meeting and go through that budget with me, line by line, I am more than happy. It will be an education for me. If the more questions that you ask me, the more I can dig in. So please don't be shy about that. Now that I've got the warrant pretty well done, I've got all kinds of time between now and Monday.
So please take advantage of that. If you really would like to, if you're serious about what that budget C looks like, if that's something that you think is achievable, a no and a no, and then there's an alternative budget, come help me make it. I really do encourage you to try to do that. Sorry.
Hi, John Lukacs, Angel Brook Village as well. Listen, I'm in favor of at least passing the budget without the override. I'm ambivalent about passing it with the override, and the reasons, a couple of reasons. I think trash is an essential service. It's something that you need to do, and if you leave it up to people, okay, you can run into problems with people deciding they're going to just throw it by the wayside and everything, and that becomes an even bigger problem from the town. So I don't think hitting people with that kind of a fee is a great idea. They're not going to cut out their electricity, and they're not going to cut out their water, but they would cut out their trash enterprise fund and just figure out a way to dispose of their trash some other way, legal or illegal.
Can I offer just, you can keep going, but I've been digging into communities that are still offering trash under their taxation, in their general budget. I have found 2 in the state of Massachusetts that offer trash, because the majority of communities do not offer a municipal trash program. Of those towns that do offer municipal trash, there are 2 towns that are doing it under taxation. Everybody else is doing it as as an enterprise fund, where the user pays the cost of the trash. And so I'm not saying that you're wrong, that it's an essential service. Water is an essential service. Sewer is an essential service, right? Lights are an essential service, but you pay for those based on your level of use, which is why the pay-as-you-throw is an essential part of this program. Anyway, pause.
But as I said, water and electric, people are not going to deliberately stop paying their bills because they can't do it. They'd have to go and get jugs of water out from the store, and that would be more expensive. So that's not from the standpoint of a selfish individual. That's not going to be an option they would take. Whereas in the case of trash, it's very easy for them. They're driving by, and just drop it off by the side of the road.
I'll find them.
Yeah. Okay. The other problem I have with the override that you're talking about is you're saying, so that would solve the problem for this year. You'd have an extended contract with the hauler, in which case this year we would continue to be able to use the bins we're using, and next year you would develop an enterprise fund, but then we would be probably having to get bins. Is that correct? Now, the problem I have with that is, so what you're really doing is saying this year the override is for trash, but next year the money we spent, the override that we got, which is almost entirely to continue trash, is now going to be going to other purposes.
I'm not saying that Mass state law says that.
What do you mean?
Massachusetts general law says that when you vote an override, and if you tie it to a service, or you tie it to a program, that first year, your municipality is obligated to provide that. After that, after year 2, which is why 1991, everybody says we voted for trash. You did in 1991. 1992, the town took that money, that $200,000, and added it to its general appropriation. And it's unfortunately or fortunately how you.
I understand that.
But so
you're only obligated when you pass an override. You're only obligated to spend that for its intended purpose in the first year. You know, but that override, the override you're passing is an operating budget override. You know, no matter what it's intended for, it's still to increase the budget by a certain amount. And you can argue about the money being in this account or that account. It doesn't matter.
You're absolutely right. It does not matter. It is all money.
Okay, so what I'm saying is, why can't you continue at least partially to, I would be fighting next year. I don't have a problem so much this year, but next year I'd be fighting because you're saying, 100% of this is going to be funded in the enterprise fund. And I think that's wrong. I think the town has some responsibility to continue to pay for part of that out of the budget.
Very good question. May I respond? Because I can see you still got juice left to go, so. Real quickly, I have no problem with extending the municipality's ability to fund trash in the operating budget, as long as you're willing to come to the town meeting and the ballot and continue to vote over it. Okay, because that's the problem. We're digging ourselves deeper and deeper and deeper into a hole. And so I'll keep trash in the general budget, but you gotta promise me you're gonna come and you're gonna support the override every single year until we get ourselves out of the hole.
And so next year, when you come if we do this, and you come to it for an operating budget override for other departments,
Yeah.
you should be clear about that and say, this is for other departments, and if you don't do that, now the option would be, you're not gonna take it out of, if you decide to partially fund, what do you call it, trash pickup next year, in next year's budget, okay, and we agreed to do part of that, but you need an operating budget for other purposes, you're not, I hope you don't come back and say, oh, well, if you don't pass this budget, then we're gonna cut out, and you're gonna have to pay the full cost of trash. Because, see, the increases were because of those other departments, not because the trash was.
So you've only met me tonight.
Yeah.
I'm not shy. I'm not hiding anything. I'm probably too transparent, right? Next year's budget is going to be next year's budget, and we will get to it. And I fully expect to have these types of meetings. Hopefully, they'll be even better attended. I'm already pretty impressed with the number of people that have come out, but for sure. And I also don't think that it is entirely off the table that even if we were to present an enterprise fund proposal to you at your next May town meeting, that there isn't an opportunity for the town, whether it be through one-time revenues, stabilization, free cash, to offset. It's not uncommon for a brand new baby enterprise fund to still need some supplemental support from the municipality itself. So we have, but I'm even getting ahead of myself because we have so many, we gotta get through Monday. If you get me through Monday, right, we're gonna have a whole year to hash this out, and we'll do it together, because this is really the West Boylston's budget, it's West Boylston's problem, it's West Boylston's trash. And if I can make it through Monday, and I'm still here, we're gonna do this.
Okay, just one last point. I was a town meeting member in Shrewsbury for several years. They represented the town meeting elected. And so I got pretty involved in the politics there. And so I know a lot about the whole idea of operating budget overrides. Someone said it's not really a permanent budget override. The fact is that effectively it is. Because in order for you to change it, you would have to get a vote of the town meeting for an underride, and then you would have to get a town-wide election to agree to that. So therefore, in that respect, it's permanent as much as anything can be permanent.
I think the semantic was that we were not going to raise it another 720. You did it so well.
You did, nobody said it better than you said.
The authorization isn't permanent. So in order to raise more than 2.5% in any future year, there would have to be a vote again. But the 725,000 will be in, and will be more than permanent. It compounds.
Yeah, exactly.
That's true.
So it's permanent.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Gary Peterson, Prospect Street. Couple of things. One, while this gentleman was speaking, I thought of something, and I'm old and I forget if I don't ask quickly. On the enterprise fund, will the enterprise fund be a mandated service? Now, we're going to be paying as taxpayers for it, and quite a few years ago, we got up here and they told us that the sewer hookups would not be mandated either. It was based on need. I didn't need it, I was forced to hook up. Am I going to be forced to participate in this if enough people don't participate in it and you can't meet the budget? So no.
If in a way, perhaps it makes it a little more equitable that if you are a taxpayer and you are not putting trash out, for curbside. You are still funding curbside trash, right? In this case, if you chose not to participate, and I think that the timing kind of works well with the carts, because we know that next year we have to move to the carts, and that's gonna be sort of the who's in, who's out defining moment there.
That's fine.
Yeah,
Just,
yeah.
you know,
I mean, and again, making most of this up as I go along, because, I mean, we really have so many details that have to be worked out. But no, I can unequivocally say that it would not be a mandated service.
Okay, very good. The question I did have, last year, we were given some charts graphs, and I know this year you decided not to because they were on a bit confusing side. But one of them, which I would believe would apply to this year, hasn't been that long. It was supplied by the DOR, and it has the various towns in central Massachusetts listed on here and their per capita income. West Boylston is third from the bottom. Only Clinton and I believe Leicester are under us in per capita income. We are, however, and I don't know if I should be concerned about this, we are leading the way in the percentage of funds extracted from our residents based on per capita income at 17.56%, which is far and away higher than any other central Massachusetts town.
What is that 17%?
It's the average tax bill as a percent of income. So our taxpayers in the town are paying a higher percentage of their monies towards property taxes than any other town in central Massachusetts.
I'd like to, I was promised at some point that you were gonna make a visit to the office, so maybe that's a good excuse, if you could come in and bring me that.
See
We'll
you
take a
Friday.
look, okay.
Can't do it tomorrow, but I'll see you Friday. But I think they've got that information.
And I think part of that's probably offset by the fact that we have such a high amount of DCR land
Well,
in
this
pilot
is per
ones.
capita, this has nothing to do with open land.
Right.
It has nothing to do with that. This is per capita income of the individuals that are taxpayers in the town.
Well, not necessarily the individuals that are taxpayers, but the individuals that live in town.
Live in town.
So they may or may not be property taxpayers, that's all I'm saying, because if they're renters, they're not taxpayers.
DOR income per capita.
Per
That's
capita,
how it's
which
listed.
includes everybody in the town.
Including children?
No, it does not include children, it includes, but at one time, I think included the jail. I mean, so that was part of
It seems to me, and again, you guys, the finance guys, and I look for you to answer those questions, but it seems like we're awful high on taking that 17%. I mean, I think of that in my mind, if I were paying 17% of my per capita income just on property taxes. You know, it's, you know, when you compare it to the other towns that are 10, 12%,
I think you also have to look at the size of the other towns too, Gary. Am I right? Because I think we're
some
probably one of the
some
smaller.
large,
Yeah, I
it's
think-
all central Mass,
I think we
and
went-
it's an average.
Well, look,
I
yeah.
really think this is a fundamental issue that is bigger than any one municipality.
Maybe we're
I
just-
mean, it really is a statewide concern.
It is.
How we regressively fund our town services. I mean,
Maybe
it's,
we're just trying to live beyond our means. I
are
don't
you,
know.
did they get you in the?
Yeah, I would also note, just putting something Chris said in a different format, if our commercial revenue was 2 or 3 times higher, that number would be profoundly lower. So, and we have a limited tax base that we start with. So, and I think that drives that figure more than anything else.
Again, before I make any comment, I want to thank you for the village. And I appreciate this lady's comments about not casting aspersions on Angel Brook. We are a citizen, so I accept that. With Mr. Lukash's comment, I totally agree with him. What we explained last week was that you wouldn't come back to the town for an overrun of trash, because the trash cost, if we approve it, it's going to be part of the operating budget. So therefore, you won't come back, I think Heather, when Heather mentioned that there will never be another override request for trash. That's because the trash is going into the operating budget, as Mr. Lukash said. Understand? But we mentioned that for the next, I don't know, 5 to 7 years, we begin doing overrides, I think.
I know how long.
Yeah, well, I think you mentioned.
We have to climb out of the deficit that we're in now.
Yes, agreed. And I think you mentioned, in the presentation last week was different than the presentation this evening. I get in a few minutes late, but in the presentation last week, you mentioned that you gave up on the 5-year override, which didn't pass last year.
I didn't give up
No,
on it.
no,
I mean,
no, you didn't.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I think Ray, I think in the initial slides, they talked about, we went for a $3.8 million override last year.
if I only had to do this once and we got a 5-year override, I'd be a very happy
No,
camper.
no, and that's consistent with what you said, there's no agreement there. But I think what you mentioned there was, last week, the 3.8 million override, which didn't pass, you were looking, as I recall, of the problem in my view, last year you asked for 3.8 million override, but you only specified the 500,000, which was going to be primarily to the schools. So the issue, I don't know how people voted, I can only know how I took the vote. My sense was the reason why it didn't pass is because it was the 3.8 versus 0.5. It was a 3.3, I shouldn't say slush fund, excess funds. There was no explanation as to which we use that funds for, so people didn't vote for it. So as the presentation was, you're now going for annual overrides, correct?
Correct.
Correct. And I think you explained, I shouldn't say you, but I will say that the group explained that for the next because the 5-year override didn't pass, the expectation of the town is that there'll be overrides the next 5 to 7 years. I thought that's what I remember.
Yeah, no, that wasn't said, although it might have been implied.
Yeah, I think that was.
The reality is, we don't know, anything beyond next year is a pure guess.
I agree with you, but if the statement was made 5 to 7, I do recall the statement. But anyway, but I think Mr. Lukash's comments were exactly correct, is that the reason why you will never, it was stated very clearly last week, you will never come back to the town for an override on trash. Is that correct?
If we move it out of the operating budget and into an enterprise fund.
Well, what I understood was, it came out of the override and went into the operating budget. Now, I don't know what the enterprise fund is, but it was, what's the enterprise?
It's a separate entity, like the sewer enterprise. You pay separately for your sewer.
Okay, gotcha, okay. You explained, I think someone, I want my fingers, but someone explained that there was another option where if the override didn't pass, that, well, first off, my understanding is that the town put out the trash contract for a 5-year contract to 2 or 3 vendors. Republic came back and offered 433 or something in that range for 5 years. And to this lady's question, which I think should be explained, I'm not suggesting, I'm not telling how people have voted, but if both the override and the budget do not pass, the town, I believe, from what I understand, has another option where, and once the budget is passed, they've got a 5-year contract with Republic that could be signed for $433,000. That's not correct?
Yeah, the number is not correct.
Okay, what is the
So
number?
whatever the number is,
Yeah,
unless the override passes,
yeah,
I do not have an appropriation to sign the contract.
agreed, I agree with
Agreed.
you.
Okay.
But if both don't pass,
If we walk out on Monday with no budget,
correct, but what you.
I will be so sad.
No, I understand that, I totally agree. But I understand that from the SWAT advisory committee, when I looked through the minutes, that they have looked at, I don't know, there are 3 options on the
Yeah,
table,
yeah.
of which Republic has been an offer of, I think it's 433 or something like that. What are the numbers? What are the-
I don't remember the exact number, but there's the first year number, and then it's a 5% increase on there. And again, that is only to pick it up. They
Correct.
do not process it. That's a separate contact.
Well,
with the
that's,
seller.
and that was a pick up of trash weekly and recycle twice, once every 2 weeks, correct?
No,
No.
everything's weekly, same as it is now.
What is-
Nothing
okay.
changes this first year for you.
Okay, I thought it was, language.
That was if you went to a privatized trash.
That's not, okay. So there are options on trash, that if the override does not pass and the budget does not pass, there is a backup plan. I think I shouldn't say point. The explanation last week was, I think
you were thinking, the town was thinking of charging people, I think, $231 per household, as like an electric, just like we.
No, so I don't have any pricing. And there is no way that I quoted any amount of money. What I said is that we would model it similar to the town of Holden. We would use Holden has an enterprise fund, right? Holden's rates are Holden's rates, and it's based on their contracts and what they can sustain for their residents. They have a much different community than we do. What I said was that their annual trash is about $20 a month for the large containers and $14.50. But again, that's Holden. I can't in any way, shape, or form guarantee that our prices will be that. We do have a bit of a backup.
I think it's just important to be really clear, though, that any enterprise fund would not be put together in a matter of days and weeks, which means that we're talking about next year, which means that if we do not pass a budget on Monday, we've got days and weeks to create a budget, have a special town meeting, pass the budget, and we've got June 25th is the deadline to sign a trash contract.
Yes.
So we're talking about hours and days to put something together that passes a town meeting. And we will not have time for a town election, so there wouldn't be an override.
Right.
So we'd be cutting something that none of us want to cut out of the budget.
But it's gonna force you to relook at the budget. That's my point.
We've looked at it for 6 months, but yes, that's what it would force us to do.
But I think
Yeah, we've got people that back up.
Can I make one last comment, then I'll be done?
Yeah.
Okay, I made a comment last week that you mentioned that in the NFPA recommendations, there are 4 firemen that show up on an EMT call. Is that correct? Under the new rule? That's, I thought that.
For a fire staff of fire.
But under Tom Welch, it was 2 people. Is that correct?
I can't.
But
Yeah.
you
Sorry,
guys-
there's no discussion of it, we can't,
That's not
I-
correct.
we
I
can't hear
under-
anything you guys can't see.
The NFPA.
I know.
Well,
I understand.
Well, you're wrong. The NFPA rule is 4.
But-
Under Tom Welsh,
Yes.
he had call-out firefighters.
Okay, correct.
And he relied on call-out firefighters to get 4 people to a fire.
But
Now, we don't have very many fires. We have 1 house fire every 4 years in West Boylston. As Tom Welsh said, he's an ambulance service that occasionally puts out a fire.
correct, but based on Wednesday, Thursday, you mentioned that in your budget, there's a 13.41% increase in public safety line.
Correct.
You would explain it.
Excuse me, in due respect, if you want to just cycle back to the end of the line, you're welcome to ask another question, but let's let these other folks go. Okay, please, miss.
Laura Buchanan, 162 Maple Street. Just going off what the gentleman had said earlier about the 17%, I do have concerns about a 2.5 override that is in perpetuity because of our population that is on a fixed income. Primarily, that is a big concern of mine, and so that's my comment. Thank you.
There's also the senior article of working off their tax.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Good, next
We
question.
do have a senior tax abatement work-off that is available to residents that are 60 or over, which doesn't help everybody, but, yeah.
Hey, my name's Ed Ashwell, I live on Woodland Street. I am also running for one of the seats on the select board. So a couple questions. One, does the finance committee still have open seats?
It does.
I would encourage the previous gentleman to maybe take one of those seats, since he seems so sound in his mind that you all may have missed something. Perhaps if he was attending routinely the budget meetings, he could have a better understanding and maybe influence where appropriate on the committee. Unfortunately, I think we find ourselves more or less in the 9th hour. I think we have a very competent finance committee and a very competent trash SWOT analysis team that has brought us the best of what is essentially a slightly bad situation. There are towns in the state that are worse off, but obviously it's not great. No one in the history of Republic since the Romans said, gee, let me pay more taxes. It is what it is. I think I support the proposition override. I agree that we need to move towards a different system, and I hope that in the coming year we can at least try to get a little more creative in those finances. But at this point in time, I don't think we have a whole lot of wiggle room to adjust. So that's my stance. One other question. So in the last meeting, it was pointed out that roughly 50% of our lands are under DCR control. They do give us some compensation, but it's fairly low. I think 1.1% based on the value of the land. But
That's the increase over, what was it, 20 years?
So it's 20 years, it's been less than the 1.5% increase.
So do we need to lean on our state representatives to figure out, is there some arm wrestling of that? Because it seems like as time goes on, that will continue to be a larger and larger weight on the budget, especially as it kneecaps our town's ability to expand in a state where housing is a constantly in demand. So is that something that?
Yeah, but we have attempted that several times.
Okay.
I think to the point where DCR really didn't want to talk to us anymore. But we have Representative O'Day here. I don't know, would you like to comment?
Yeah, they don't want to speak to me anymore either, because I've been fighting that fight for 18 years, and for anyone in town to think that that hasn't been a constant conversation, both with the select board, with myself, and everyone else who recognizes, 60% of the town is owned by the DCR. Beyond that, we don't have a great deal of commercial property, which is also another issue that we are struggling with here tonight, trying to figure out where does the money come from. I think the pilot payment from there is like $650,000. Unquestionably not enough, but I can tell you in their overall budgets, they very rarely are funded to the degree that they need to be funded at. So it's an issue, but we can also state that we're not the only town that has DCR properties in them, and each and every one of those other towns are trying to fight the same battle. They may not be as heavily burdened as we are with the 60%, but there are others, right? So it's frustrating, trust me.
Coming from the hill towns, I can tell you your pilots look pretty darn good. I mean, it gets decreased. The further west you go, the lower the percentage of what you are paid, of what a community is paid. You're in the middle. Boston area, their pilots are much higher than yours, but if you go further west, it's pennies on the dollar. So.
Well, thank you for that information.
You're welcome.
And I'd love if I could make the select board to hopefully partner with you and our other towns that are suffering under that DCR rate and see if we can figure out how to work that to slightly better. Because even a small percent increase would seemingly help a town where we're only about 2.5% off of where we need to be budget-wise to inch that forward, and it would obviously help quite a bit. Boston greatly benefits from the clean water that works its way through our town. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Christine Biscotti from Chino Ave. At one point in the presentation, you mentioned that there's some of our budget that comes from the state, and I was just wondering what percentage of the budget that is, and also if there's anything federal. And the reason I'm asking is because, like today, the news said that there's a hiring freeze at the state level, and so just wondering, in the future, what could possibly also be lost if the state is losing their funding and then they can't funnel it down to us?
So to answer your question, it's 13.1%. If you take a look at year-over-year increases, we did that analysis, it's 1.5% per year. So even less than the 2.5% increase. And if you look at the others, local receipts is completely dependent on user demand and who buys cars. We have no control or ability to predict that. And our new growth was less than last year. So
Okay, thank you.
only so many things within our control.
Thanks.
I'm sorry, the gentleman.
Yeah, that state aid, that's, to me, that's
seems low, and I'm wondering, has anybody taken a closer look at that? Because in Shrewsbury, I know up until we moved out of there in 2019, they were getting around 20% of their budget was state aid, okay? And it surprises me that this number is so low, and I'm wondering whether we haven't missed some opportunities to increase that. And one of the areas would be, I know the state penalizes education departments in some towns if they don't fund the school department to the extent they want. So the question becomes one of, are we funding the school department enough so that we don't get penalized by having the state reduce its state aid? In any event, my point is that other towns are getting much higher percentages of their budgets covered by state aid. We should be looking at why that is, why we're so low.
Well, I can't personally quote details as to why. Shrewsbury is a much bigger town, has a lot more leverage. I would guess that is a starting point. But our finance team is rigorous beyond words. If there were a penny to be had, Leslie in particular would have found it. And I'm not aware of any large offsets because of not meeting preconceived levels of funding.
Okay. All right. Again, I appreciate it. Good. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that our state aid is based on the various, state budgets. So we get Chapter 70 money, which offsets our schools, get Chapter 90 money, which offsets our roads. We get our unrestricted government aid, which is, based on the budget that the legislature passes. The numbers, there's a formula, they're called cherry sheets, and if you look at them, they are what they are. They are consistent year after year. I don't think that there's anything wrong with our formula. I think it has to do with our demographic and where we fit into the bigger pie that is the state of Massachusetts. So I don't think we're missing anything. We have the local rooms option, we have the local meals, we have local cannabis. We have all of the local options that are available to us, and to the extent that those are used by the residents and by visitors, that money does come back to us. But unfortunately, I don't think we're missing any revenues. I wish. But I will say to the schools, your schools are your economic driver. The better schools you have, the more people that want to live in your community and the more younger people that want to live in your community. So cutting schools and further limiting their programming does not serve your community well at all. And I'm looking at you because but all of you, your schools are your economic drivers. Your senior center, your library, right up there, but it's really your schools.
Okay,
Yeah,
again.
I want to give you that.
Okay, last comment.
I don't know what I'm doing anymore.
Last comment and I'm done. Okay, again, once again, I appreciate what you're doing, there's no question. And I realize we're in the 25th hour of a 24-hour day. We're with respect to the budget. It was very clear last week. But the only comment I make is with respect to the on-call firefighters versus the on-staff. What I understood last week was that, I don't want to mention names, but the former fire chief used to have 2 full-time firefighters. They would get on-call, as this gentleman said. The on-call volunteer, the other one, okay. Now in the new budget, there's a 13.41% increase in the safety, which is police and fire. It was explained, as I understand it, the bulk of that was fire. And the new chief requires 4 people on, I'll say, an EMT call, if I understood correctly. And he's following NFPA recommended rules. My point to you last week was, I'm an angel, not to, but we had a situation this past year with hydrant flushes. So we did a hydrant flushing, and the contractor said to us, you need to do bing, 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 bing with NFPA rules. When we talked to the West Boylston Fire Department and talked to other people, we found that the NFPA rules are recommendations. They are not legal Massachusetts law. So what I'm concerned about is, I would like to know what portion of that 13.41% increase in fire budget is due to the conversion of 2 firefighters full-time with on-call, and on-call, versus 4 full-time firefighters. To me, to think that, look, I've been in business for 50 some odd years, and I know how things work. And I know when new people come in, they want to set up the organization the way they want it. And what I'm concerned is that maybe, perhaps the new fire chief would like to have 4 firefighters on call, where we used to have 2. So I would like to know what portion of that 13.41% increase in the fire budget is due to going to 4 firefighters, I assume 4 full-time, versus 2 full-time and 2 on call.
Well, I don't have the breakdown, but frankly, the average salary increase with all steps and lane changes included is about 3.5%. So the bulk of the balance is for the new hires. Now, we can get you a specific number, and I would also follow up your point. You had raised this at the last meeting, and it's a good question. We will talk and find out if it's a guidance or requirement.
Exactly. But, and I really, again, you and Chris mentioned, and I respect your judgment. And I realize we're too late in the process. But to think that we're going ahead and funding a budget that has these people built into the budget when the questions weren't asked.
Questions have been asked. I mean, first of all, the turnover in the fire department's been very high. So the salaries, the starting salaries, the entry-level salaries have gone up substantially. That's a big chunk of that number. The other part of that number is to have 4 firefighters. And the chief's been working on that for 2 years. It's not like he thought about it yesterday. And we've been talking about it, and he's been adding those people relatively slowly. Do you want to go into a burning house when it's not safe? When you don't have adequate personnel?
Well, the question...
These people are trained, and this is the recommendation. Suppose 2 people do go into a burning house, don't follow the NFPA recommendation. What's the answer in court then
But again, the NFPA is a firefighter support organization. It's not.
I know about the NFPA.
Okay.
I'm involved. So the NFPA.
I have plenty of firefighter friends.
All right.
Okay. I'm only saying that to think that, I think the comment last week was, we'll look at that for next year. And I realize it's too late for this year. But to think honestly that nobody investigated that, and I didn't know that until this year myself.
You didn't listen to me. I just told you.
Well, you just said that, but you didn't say that last week. Well, you said that tonight because of.
So now you know.
Well, I've accepted your explanation, but that's not what you said. Nobody explained that last week when I asked the question. So that's a question.
Well, I think you were speaking mostly with Chris and I, and we simply didn't have that information. We have lead connections with certain departments, and Pete is our connection to the public sector.
You're right, you're absolutely right, there are supposed to be guys happy. But anyways, well, that's my last.
Okay, thank you. Please.
Just as a closing statement, because I'm sure this is going kind of long, but as a closing statement, I just want to say again, thank you to all you guys for having these informational sessions. To me, this has been really eye-opening. I think you guys all did a great job. The SWAT team, the select board, you guys have all been great, and I appreciate all your time and effort for this. I hope that the budget passes, or the override passes, so that you don't have to start from scratch again. That seems like kind of just a waste of everybody's time. You put together a great presentation. What I would say is that the other thing that I caution people on is, your entire committee has openly endorsed this override. I don't know that the SWAT team has taken a position or not as the override. I know that, right? So I think they'd probably prefer that, right? And I know the select board, I think all but one member, I believe, you were opposed to the override. The rest of 4 out of 5, all were in favor of this. So that, to me, as somebody who can't attend every meeting and isn't informed on everything and every little detail of things, that's enough for me to say, if you guys all endorse it and we voted to put you guys on these boards, then that's a good reason for us as citizens to trust the people we elected and vote for this override. So,
thank you. I would also note that the dissenting vote was on the entire budget article, not on override versus non-override. As I
All right,
understand
we'll
it.
talk about that then. The vote was, my personal feeling about, well, here's my question, I was gonna say, motivate me to vote for the B budget. Motivate everybody to vote for a B budget that has no trash.
We can't, or we would have endorsed it if we felt we could, with a straight face, endorse it.
Did you not endorse it?
We did endorse it, but we endorsed it because the alternative of not having a budget is.
So I think that what came across at the select board meeting was my point that, yes, I'll endorse the article. That's the whole thing that says, yes, we in fact do need a budget. It's crazy to not have a budget. But I do not like the non-trash budget. I think there's nothing good for the town, and I call it the non-trash budget. So that's why I voted down, and it doesn't matter, 4 votes went for it. It's the same way that other things did. If you could motivate me to vote for the B budget, not just me, motivate everybody that that's a good idea. I think that that would be a seller, but
I'll try.
I don't want a non-trash budget.
So the only other alternative that was fiscally responsible and wouldn't impact safety is to get rid of the senior center and the library. And I think those are terrible options. They impact a lot of people in town. It would mean no Libby, we can't go borrow from Shrewsbury, no preschool programs at the library, no meals at the senior center, no information sessions.
Too, for the exact same
Well,
reason.
exactly. And so which of those two very bad options is the least bad? And I think, the select board, the finance committee, the town administrator all said, losing trash is really unfortunate for all of us, and we'll all have to pay more, and it's bad, but losing the library and the senior center would really impact the families in town, it wouldn't impact more people, because trash impacts everybody, but it would impact us in a way that we can't replace as individuals. We can replace trash as individuals. It will cost us more, so it doesn't seem like a very good option, but we can do it. We cannot replace the library or the senior center by ourselves as individuals. There's no private option for that.
And exactly, that's the whole point, is it's a hard call to make, it's a rock and a hard place, it's a hard thing to do, and I just wanted that point to come across also. That's fine. The select board ended up endorsing it on a not 100% vote, and I wanted that to come across, that it isn't a wonderful thing all around.
The only thing I wanted to make a comment to Gary Peterson about the tax per capita in our town. And I think Ray, I don't want it to be overlooked, but Ray at the last, as you were, I think, walking back to your seat, made a point that we really, I don't have the data in front of me, but I know there was a posting out there that showed the number of commercial taxpayers in this town versus residential. And it's pathetically small in comparison to our neighboring towns. And I think that will naturally increase the per capita tax payments of your property owners, the residential property owners.
I was also going to talk about that one. I believe the 17% is 17% of the adjusted median income, where people who have high value properties are not those salaries. But the way the statistic comes out, the average tax as a percentage of mean income is 17%. But the people paying, I don't think anybody pays 70%. The people paying higher taxes have higher income and they have higher value properties and all this kind of thing. So I think it's not a misleading statistic. I just think it's sort of a statistic for statistics' sake, not really a truth.
Yeah, in order to stake anything on it, we'd have to dig into that a bit deeper. But I also wanted to comment your question, well, tell me on option B, what are the alternatives? Well, we anticipated exactly that question. That's why there's a slide going through every option that from a pure number standpoint could work if you ignored the implications. There were no others.
Yeah, no, I admit it's a hard rock and a hard place, and it's a difficult thing, and I don't think...
I want to ask you a question. A and B fail. What's your choice then?
It's a hard thing too. I mean, I don't know.
So you don't have a choice. We've got exactly, 2 weeks? If it fails? 2 weeks to come up with our choice.
There would be
You're a select board member. What's your choice? What are you going to do?
It would probably be to go back to the B budget.
Close the senior center, close the library.
No, it would be to just totally disrupt
Go
everything.
to the B budget with trash? How are you gonna
Yes,
do that?
it would be the B budget with trash and drain a lot of accounts that we shouldn't drain. We would drain accounts like
You're
free
gonna
cash.
drain
we would drain-
stabilization.
Yes, that's
So
all that
our-
kind of stuff. That would be
Then
an
we're
awful
going to
thing
be
do.
in trouble on our bond rate.
We'd be in trouble
We're
on
gonna be
everything.
criticized across the board. You don't have an option either.
Well, okay, if you want to attack, no, I don't have an option, but it wasn't really my thing to come up with one.
No, you're asking us to sell you on the B budget. There's the sales pitch right there. You don't have an alternative.
Well, that's not the same, but okay, that's good, that's okay.
That is the same.
Okay, democracy is democracy. To put something ahead of people that's an awful choice is, this is our best thing and it's awful, have at it. It's not what I like to say I would want to do as a select board member.
As we would prefer not to be in this situation as well.
I don't want to keep going because we have to get out of here.
We're all volunteers.
I have another one, I just want to defend the fire department. I feel the fire department is doing what we want them to do. They got the $750,000 grant, they paid for a truck, they gave back some money on the CIP. I mean, they're doing the things we want. And the truth is, I think the problem that they're having is that on-call isn't what it used to be. There's just not people around that you can depend on to be the second to, or the second, or the third, or whatever it is, when you have an emergency. And that's why the fire department's going the way it is. I think the fire chief is doing the right things, he's finding these grants, he's doing what he's supposed to be doing. I don't want to say that there's a mistake in the fire department. I think we're doing okay.
We agree, I think.
Yeah, no, I'm talking to you because that's the way we're supposed to do this. It's sort of a public announcement from me.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that point. We discussed this extensively with the fire chief.
Yes.
He said the dependable on-call firefighters are down to 3, and those are all going to age out within a couple of years.
Right, no, he's
So it won't even be an
he's
option.
doing what we want department heads to do. He's getting his problem solved. Now, well, it's not a fire.
You're going to get penalized for puns.
First of all, Pete Roscoe, 17 Linden Street. I'd like to commend you all for the passion that you have in what you've accomplished. Okay, and I'm a proud West Boylston person. I left the town and I came back, you know. But the big thing is that I noticed tonight that there was a mention of Holden's trash setup. Can we do that, even though we have a trash system that's already, well, chances are the override's gonna pass. Okay, at least that's my thoughts. But the thing is that I think now's the time to start working on a system, regardless if we have a system that's working at this point, because trash is gonna go up, all right? Family members that have worked for the trash systems for 25 years, and every year it goes up. But the thing right now is that, is there in the committees, we need to have someone or a panel to sit down and draw it up so it can be presented to the people, not in an emergency situation.
You will be the chair.
Oh yeah, so I can fall asleep.
Congratulations on your new appointment.
Oh, thank you. No, but
Well,
seriously.
the
can
reality
we do
is,
that?
that's what will happen next.
Okay.
If we are able to engage trash in June for the term of the contract that's been negotiated, it is absolutely the priority for the town administrator to put something together to present real detail and numbers at the fall town meeting for town citizens to approve.
Okay, so how long does the actual contract, is it a year-to-year contract or is
5
it?
years.
It's for 5 years.
First year is gonna be something that we're taking care of under taxation.
Right.
You're voting for it in
Yeah.
your override.
Right.
We're gonna commit those funds.
Yeah, we commit those funds. Yeah, yes. First year, those funds are in the budget for trash. We committed. I have however many months it takes to work with SWAT the select board, this group, and yourself, to make sure that we have our numbers and that we bring forward to town meeting a proposal that is manageable. We don't know what those numbers are gonna look like. I'm referencing Holden simply because they are a very nearby community that handles their trash. They bill it on their light bill, it goes out to the residents, and it gets managed through that process that you all share. You all get this, you know. So that's why, but what Holden's numbers are would be different than what West Boylston's numbers are. So I just want to make sure that I'm saying that as many times as possible, because I don't want anyone coming in and saying my bill isn't $14, because it's not going to be. But anyways, yes, that's the plan.
Okay. That's all I have to say.
Effective immediately.
Thank you.
June 4th, June 5th.
All right, Chairman.
Yeah, he is. Can't wait.
So, on the tax rate, Chris was talking about, the different tax rate, or right now we have the same tax rate for personal and business, or residential business.
Yes, you have a single rate.
And even if we have a different rate, you still need, in order to, well, you could either have the same levy and have it skewed differently, or you could keep us the same and go up with an override, right? If you wanted to raise taxes and keep ours the same but charge them more, it would be an override?
No, so under 2.5, we'll just start there. If we say at 2.5, then we raise X number of dollars for 2.5. If you, as a select board, at your next tax classification hearing in November, if you chose to take and split the tax rate, we're still not going to be able to raise anything more than 2.5. Right. So if we vote the override and we increase over 2.5, and you then go to the tax classification and split that tax rate, it's still going to be that same number. Yeah. So
I think we don't do that because it's a favorable thing to have businesses hopefully come into town. But that, I mean, I was looking at that, we were asking for options. I was looking to see how much of an impact that is. Businesses only pay less than, I think, $500,000 all over.
Yeah.
Even if you doubled their tax rate, it doesn't solve our problem, and they would leave.
Right.
I mean, it's not a solution. So I am looking, they just don't have the solution. How's that?
And you're not bringing in any more money. You're still bringing in the exact same number of dollars. It's just your tax rate for the businesses is going to be higher than the residents is lower. Still same dollars, unfortunately.
Oh, what does the, to start the enterprise thing, and we go to town meeting, what does the enterprise motion have to look like? Could we do that, could we get that started this year so that if you got something going halfway through the year, you could implement it and save a little bit of money?
Well, I would hesitate to implement the enterprise at your October semi because, again, we have committed that the override funds, if approved this year, would be for trash. And what we could do is we could have at the semi some really good information about where we're heading for the next year so that people could get their heads around that and we could start asking questions. We could use that as a really good informational period of time. But I wouldn't want to implement it mid-year because I think that it would negate what we're saying, that the funds that you're voting for override pays for trash.
I mean, I'm the select board person that has wackadoodle ideas and people don't like.
I love your wackadoodle ideas.
So
they send me down rabbit holes, but I like them.
So don't even follow them, just say yes or no. So when I was in my wackadoodle head, I'm imagining preparing the motion and whatever, trying to get you to be able to do that. Should we amend the override motion this time to allow us to get out of, if we needed to start that halfway through, we could? Or, put in the words like, unless another source like the enterprise system is in place, we can spend that override money on other things.
I can ask town council if there's a motion that could be put together.
And
That
it's in
doesn't-
preparation.
Yeah,
I mean, you
yeah,
don't have
yeah,
to do it
I don't
It's
have an
all right.
answer, but, no, it's worth asking, because if you're asking, somebody else might ask, so I better have an answer.
Well, I was challenged to come up with other solutions right here.
Right, I know. The other solutions are really, I mean, so I said at some point I should really have a C budget. And I started looking at it, and I can assure you that even engaging other staff members to begin to help me with that would have sounded alarm bells near and far and created unnecessary panic in our town.
And recall going over some presentations that we had more detail, and people were like, this is crazy.
Right.
That was the point, but it wasn't taken
So-
as this is an illustration of how crazy it is.
Right, so even beginning the process of talking with other officials about what a C budget looks like was not something I was ready to do, simply because I've watched your socials. I see how quickly things light up.
Oh, well, take it from me, I don't
And,
want to.
well, I made the mistake, but I see how quickly things light up and how quickly that goes from, hey, what about, to, oh my goodness, did you hear the town is shutting down the police department? And I really can't, I don't want that. I don't want that going into town meeting. I want to go into town meeting confident that we have put together the best two options that we have.
With dissenting vote of the.
With a dissenting vote, right. And we'll light the bomb if we have to.
New guy.
New guy. Anyway.
Potentially.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
back in, new guy and.
But to answer people's questions, why don't you have a C budget? That is truthfully why. It just is so challenging to create that without causing more harm and creating more drama than what we need in the moment. So,
Thank you very much.
did I say that right?
No, I think it's reasonable. And Mark, if you think through the logistics, for us to have an enterprise fund, we have to create an enterprise fund. So we'd start that in the fall, and then you've got all the logistics of dealing with the containers and, the deals of any contract changes and all the logistics. It just, if we're able to create the enterprise in October, I think we can be ready for the beginning of the next fiscal year, and that will be the goal. Hit the ground running, so.
Hey, the rollout date. See what I did there? The rollout date.
Okay, I think you might have the honor of being the last one. In fact, you have the honor of being the last one.
I think to your point, the magnitude of the $652,000 in the budget for trash, to try and make that up in other departments would really decimate them. So I'm happy that we didn't present a C budget. I just wanted to make the point that I'm looking at the Mass Department of Revenue data bank. And the percentage of revenues, state revenues as a percentage of total budget for Shrewsbury is 13.36 in fiscal 25, so just a year ago. Very comparable to the 13.1% that you're showing on that slide. So we're not that far out of line with the, revenues from the state.
Thank you for your online fact checking.
That is, what committee are we getting you on? Oh, no, sorry.
Okay.
I think I sound your vice chair.
All right. So everyone that chose to stick out to marathon, appreciate it. But we'll bring it to a close. If you have other questions, please come on.